believe that tourism would have recovered.
Mr. Speaker, I'm challenging you. Clarity. Anything I say, he'll say, I'll hear. That's a challenge. Anything, Mr. Speaker, I say, like the member from Miku South says, I'll clear it. I challenge him. Anything he says, I say clear it.
Flashback.
The government is continuing as usual, as if nothing happened. The government of St. Lucia is the only government that believes that tourism will get back to how it was pre-COVID. I think it's the only government in the world that believes that. There's no other government, I think, who believes that except the government of St. Lucia. So what do? We continue with business as usual. We continue to build an airport based on the fact that our airport would get its income from arrivals. Are you serious? Do you really believe? I never knew. I never understood the impact of tourism.
Good evening, St. Lucia, and let me see how pleasant it is for me to be here this evening. I'm sure you would have noticed by now that this is not the advertised Rovergate Part 3, but we have some vexing, pertinent, and urgent issues we believe that is of national interest to St. Lucia, and so we have deferred our Rovergate Part 3 to our next session. But this evening, St. Lucia, there's so many issues impacting us as a country and as a nation, and as a United Workers' Party, we thought it was important to bring those issues to the fore. So my name is Nancy Charles, and I am going to be your host for this evening roundtable. It promises to be very informative, very exciting, and maybe I can use the words of our Honorable Prime Minister. Maybe there can be a bombshell or some bombs that are going to be bursting tonight. I'm not sure which one of them, but I want you to stay tuned with us as we do our usual Thursday evening roundtable. This evening with me, I will have my guest, the political leader of the United Workers' Party. He will be coming in at the second segment of our program this evening, but I have to start off with the program, our deputy political leader, Honorable Senator Dominic Fedee. Senator Fedee, welcome. And I am not going to continue calling you Senator Fedee during the evening. I may just call you Dominic. Is that okay?
That's more than fine. It's good to be here, Nancy. Good evening, St. Lucia.
Okay. So, St. Lucia, as I said, there's so many things happening in St. Lucia right now. Sometimes I try to wrap my mind around it as a parent, as a St. Lucian, as a woman. All the issues that are facing us in St. Lucia, we are feeling it as women, especially in this country. Men as well, but I think a lot more so women. You have the issues happening in healthcare. You also have the issues happening within the police force and the allegations that have been made against senior police officer within the St. Lucia police force. But equally important, you have the issue of crime. So far, I think we are at already at murder number 53. And to date, on none of these issues, if the government doesn't come out and perhaps give a little bit of mépris and name calling to St. Lucians who bring these issues to the fore, they stay silent on some of them. But we cannot stay silent, St. Lucia. The United Workers' Party cannot stay silent, and you, as St. Lucians, you cannot stay silent. And I believe perhaps maybe one of the reasons that you are a little bit silent, I think you are becoming a lot more vocal, but maybe the reasons you are a little bit silent is because you probably don't have sufficient information about those issues, and that is the purpose of the roundtable, to bring to your attention the facts and the substance surrounding those issues affecting us, so that you, as our brave, bold St. Lucians, you can now speak out and not be afraid of what is happening in this country. Tonight, we really want to touch a bit and to continue with this corruption scandal that has rocked St. Lucia in the last couple of months. St. Lucia, this is not a joke. This is not a political issue. This is not something that the United Workers' Party has schemed up and put together to try to bring down the government. Nothing is further from the truth. This is something that has fallen into the laps of St. Lucian, just like, I don't know if you remember, sometime around 2015, 2016, another issue fell into the laps of St. Lucian. You'll remember that famous Jufali case? We knew nothing about a gentleman called Jufali. We woke up one morning, and there it was in the British newspapers, an issue about a St. Lucian ambassador who had a court matter, and the British government had written to the St. Lucian government to have this particular ambassador to sort of more or less revoke whatever it is immunity that he was privy to allow for a court matter to go through. Today, St. Lucia, same character, same individual. I think it's the same movie, but it's just a different episode. I am not sure which episode this one it is. Maybe it's episode 4, 5, or 6, but it's a different episode. But it's the same character, the same movie, same scandal, and apparently the St. Lucia Labour Party government does not want us to speak about it. However, speak we will. So, Senator Fedee, let me start off with something that has been bothering St. Lucians for a while, and I really want to get your take. Some time ago, I think it was last year, we had a serious issue, and I dare say perhaps another scandal, that was happening at the passport office. I don't know if you remember this famous case. I think St. Lucians called it the briefcase case. And there was a reason why they called it that, because it involved a company called the Briefcase. And I can certainly tell you from experience, what triggered this was that you had persons, for example, like myself, who live in Vieux-Fort. And in order for us to come up to Castries to get a passport, we had to sometimes leave our home 2 o'clock in the morning, take a line outside of the building, whether it was raining, mildew, cold, whatever it was. And the reason we had to leave so early and take a line, because the passport office was only seeing a fixed number of persons per day, whether it was 30 or 40. So if you came too late and you could not get a number, travel from Vieux-Fort to Castries, and you couldn't get a number, you had to go back. So, being who we are as St. Lucians, we decided, those of us from Soufrière, from Sourzel, wherever, and even Castries people themselves, had to wake up in their bed 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning to queue outside that place to get a number. And then it came to the attention of St. Lucians that a particular company was being given privilege. And I want St. Lucians to remember, because there's a pattern that's happening. This particular company had the privilege, if you paid them a particular sum of money, you didn't have to take the long lines. You could go to them, pay them, they would apply for your passport on your behalf, and within 2 to 3 days, you could get your passport. Whereas those St. Lucians who were on those long lines from 4 o'clock in the morning sometimes didn't get the number, but if they did get a number, sometimes they had to wait 6 weeks and 4 weeks and 8 weeks to get a passport. And so when that matter came out, the minister in question, Minister Poyot, indicated she was going to investigate that matter. Do you remember that?
Clearly.
She was going to investigate that matter, and she would let St. Lucians know what transpired, whether this was true, the allegations were true, etc. It's almost a year, nothing. However, the passport office has now transitioned. They've moved to their location where they were on Bridge Street. They've now moved, I think, is it Pena Street it's called, in there. I went there a couple of months ago. I had to renew the passport for my daughter. And I was very surprised, Senator Fedee, that we had moved from an office space where there was an elevator, although it was not working all the time, but at least you knew elderly folks had an option. If you were on a wheelchair or you had an elderly person who could, because apparently you have to do a face-to-face interview, just so you know. So there was no way out of it. You had to climb the stairs or take the elevator. They brought it to a new location. There's 2 flights of stairs. I have to say there's no railings around the stairs. It's some sort of wooden stairs. To me, it's very dangerous, because when I climbed the stairs, I was like, I couldn't believe this. So anybody in a wheelchair can't go up there. An elderly person might take an hour and a half to take their time to climb that stairs. This is where Virginia Albert Poyot has sent St. Lucians to get your passport. And I think there was a video circulating just a couple of days ago about a police officer Apparently, people still have to queue, and it was raining. And I think the gentleman went inside to shelter from the rain. A St. Lucian, a police officer, former police officer, I'm told, to shelter from the rain. And the security officer pushed him outside, trying to get what belongs to us, a St. Lucian passport. Yeah? And today, we saw videos of people in Dubai and wherever else opening their packages. It comes via DHL and FedEx and everything. They proudly boasting and showing their St. Lucian passport. These people don't even know how to get St. Lucia on a map. But they get a St. Lucian passport, and St. Lucians are being pushed out of into the rain to get a passport. Senator Fedee, you've heard of those stories. Share with us some of the stories maybe constituents or former constituents have shared with you and your own experiences with what is going on with this passport issue in St. Lucia.
Well, to add to what you have said, Nancy, just think of the hundreds of citizens and those coming from the south as well. My constituency is a little closer, but the furthest end, Canaries in Belvedere. So many people that would need to either renew or would come to get their passports. But Nancy, what I'll say to you is that in addition to that, whenever people's documents are not in place, the level of difficulty, the level of stress that they receive. Sometimes the communication is not clear from the passport office to say, well, you need X, Y, Z, and go through the various checklists. They would tell people when they arrive, after taking the line, you need this, you need that, you need that.
I've experienced
and then
that.
you get out of the line, and then now you have to go run around to the JP, to the various government agencies, wherever you need other supporting documents. That to me is a frustrating thing. But I think, Nancy, we have to trace the root of this kind of behavior. You see, every action to me comes from a certain philosophy. It comes from a mindset. And it tells you that the people that are running the country don't mind advertising on the CIP website that people can get their passports in 30 days, while all of what you've just described are happening to the people of St. Lucia in very, very grave, drastic terms.
So let me ask you a question. You just made a statement, and I have not been on the website in a little while. Are you saying to St. Lucians that while we have to wait 6 weeks and 8 weeks, and some people, I mean, you've had people complaining that they've had to wait 6 months. Persons who traveled maybe from the States to come down to renew their passport, thinking this was a simple process. You could pay for expedited passport in 3 days, have been here. 6 weeks, they had to go back and it had to be sent to them. You're saying to me that persons who are out there who wish to purchase a second passport under the CIP program, they cannot, as I said, some of them cannot identify St. Lucia on a map. They do not know where St. Lucia is, but we're saying to them that they can get a passport in 30 days?
They can get a passport in 30 days. They don't need to come to St. Lucia. There's no face-to-face interview.
So there's no line for them?
There's no line for them. All they have to do is FedEx their documents. They FedEx their ID, and the background check is done and all that stuff, and they never have to come to St. Lucia. And that's why a lot of St. Lucians feel aggrieved about the CIP program. It is because of the clear favoritism that we ascribe to foreigners as a result of running the CIP program. There are two different standards, there are two different service levels. Just imagine that if the allegations are true, there's a court case in the US federal court, and that case says that there are potentially 50-something thousand passports. I mean, let's just say that 6,000 minimum for the hotel and another 7,000 for the infrastructure project.
Right.
The government has not come out and deny it, so we're going to have to go by those numbers. And that's multiplied by 2 because everyone has a wife or family member. But I'm going to go with a minimum of
just two
in each application. So it means, therefore, that there are at least 26,000 people or 26,000 applications that could potentially have hit the passport office. We don't know how many thousands because they're not coming out to say to us.
Maybe is that the reason you think that St.
We're not
Lucians
getting
are
the
not giving,
reports.
we're not getting reports, and we're not getting priority on getting our passports either? Because it seems that, to me, the priority is to make the money.
But if you
The
listen,
priority is
if you-
CIP people getting passports.
Correct.
So that the country or the CIP office can make money, while St. Lucians have to suffer and linger for weeks and months to get a passport. Because our passport is only what? Is it $200 or $300?
Correct.
But a CIP passport is how much?
Well, are you talking about the real price or the discounted price? Because
We can get to the discounted price in a while, but the real price is supposed to
the
be...
legal price is 200,000 if you're buying into the Canals Hotel.
Right.
And it's 100,000
If you
for
do
the
the
infrastructure
donation?
or the
Okay.
donation program. But you know what I want to say, Nancy, the government has clearly shown a priority over St. Lucians. You know what's egregious? Just recently in the Parliament, and this is after several decades of St. Lucian grandparents who are living in the UK, people who went to the UK in the 50s, went to the US and different parts of the world. And these people, wherever they are in St. Croix or wherever they are, or Texas, they have been clamoring for their children's children,
Right.
what you call
So
the
that's their
third
grand-
generation St. Lucian,
Okay.
their grandkids, can become citizens and can qualify for St. Lucian passports. Because you see, Nancy, when you're a St. Lucian, regardless of where in the world you live, you value a passport as a symbol of national pride and dignity. And why a lot of people are so aggrieved with what's happening with this scandal is because of how dearly they hold the passport to their heart. And so they wanted that St. Lucianness to pass on to their grandchildren. The government only about 2 months ago made that possible. While we're selling all of these thousands of CIP files, these people qualify and are much more deserving to be citizens, to carry our passports. It is theirs, they deserve to have it, than those CIP applications. So the St. Lucia Labour Party administration, they have unfortunately diluted the dignity that should be associated with having our passports. And you know, a lot of people, if you ask them now, you hear people calling the talk shows and they say, you need to stop the CIP program. I mean, I'm sure,
I've
Nancy,
heard that a lot.
you've gotten that on your show.
I've gotten that a lot on my show. I've heard that a lot on the other talk shows. And persons have also messaged me privately to ask me, and perhaps in a later discussion, when the United Workers' Party starts to discuss policy, that may be something that they would have to speak about. But I've gotten private messages from lots of St. Lucians who say, will the United Workers' Party stop this CIP program? Because we do not like, and it's not, I think people understand the issue of money and raising funds to build infrastructure, housing and hospitals, whatever it is you talk about. But you see what we recognize and we realize based on what you're telling me as
I
well.
want
People
to be
value that patriotism of saying, I am unique, I am St. Lucian, and that piece of document that
identifies
I hold,
me.
Yes,
It's my symbol of national pride. That's me. Now, I want to be careful when, because you said about value to build roads and houses. The St. Lucia Labour Party, they've only spoken about that. They have had the opportunity. They've had windfall revenue from the CIP program, and they have not done any of those things. And so for me, Nancy, they only started talking about building homes and building community centers and playing fields when they got into trouble.
Yep.
And
Yep.
what they have done is to use that as a PR exercise. I noticed that the Prime Minister announced that he has given monies to a few organizations like a Black Movement organization. He has said he was going to give some money from CIP to
OKEU.
to OKEU. This should not be done, Nancy, because the CIP is in a reputational crisis. This should be done because there's an ethos about doing it. I mean, let's compare to when we were in government. You were the director of
For
implementation. And I look at, for example, when we were opening Owen King EU Hospital, millions were spent to furnish the hospital, to make sure that we get the hospital up to par. I mean, what's going on now is absolutely atrocious. When the banana farmers got into trouble because of the storm, the United Workers' Party government spent millions to recover the banana industry and give the farmers the level of support. Today, those same farmers can't even get boxes. I mean, the government couldn't take $1 million or $2 million from the CIP program and give it to the farmers and get some boxes, bring them in from wherever you have to if in area the plant were having issues. So, Nancy, at every step of the way, the Labour Party, it's all about public relations.
And I was about to say that I remember when we were in government, quite a few persons were asking, what are you doing with the CIP money? Where's the CIP money? And the unfortunate thing is that the government of the United Workers' Party that you served under, and I also was a part of that, it was not a government of PR, and there was not always a check-handing ceremony when we gave money to OKEU and when we gave money to the tourism industry, when we gave money to the banana farmers after the storm. We'd never held a check-handing over ceremony to say, oh, we're using CIP money to do that. And I also want St. Lucians to appreciate, Senator Fedee, that during our tenure, when we came into government, the law was there for the CIP, and the law and the regulations were that the monies for the CIP were to be deposited into what we call an economic fund. And that money from the economic fund would have been used to administer those projects. What happened is when we came into government, Alan Chastanet and his cabinet found the legislation that you could sell out passport, but there was no economic fund. And so whilst it was okay for us to go out there and sell, when the monies came in, we could not put it into an economic fund because there was none. And so the money went straight into what we call the government's coffers, into the accountant general's office, right? And so it became part of the pool of funds for the government to use. And that's why we didn't have no check handing over ceremony. We didn't go and say we're removing money from CIP to do that. But what we did every single year, because the monies formed part of the consolidated funds, the monies went in there, every single year under the Alan Chastanet administration, the money was budgeted in the budget. So St. Lucians can go, you can look at the estimates for 2016, 2017, 2017, 2018, 2018, 2019. You will see the budgetary allocations from the funds for the CIP that went into the consolidated funds. So I just wanted to put that there to show it was not a PR thing for us. We didn't have to advertise.
Do you remember when
it was just being used?
Do you remember when we got into government and they were spending $1 million to a year to rehabilitate 100 schools? You remember this?
I remember that.
And it was from the CIP program we were able to beef up the money to 10 times more than what the Labour Party was spending to upgrade our school infrastructure. We had teachers who were in classrooms who had to put buckets to catch the water because most of the school plants were leaking. You had toilet facilities that were atrocious, where parents complained about the unhygienic and dilapidated state of toilets, where simple things like plumbing weren't working. So, Nancy, we put our teachers and our students in a very difficult bind in the Labour Party that we replaced. The one which served before us in 2006 to 2011. Sorry, I mean 2011 to 2016. And there was a lot that we used the CIP funds to do. And you mentioned tourism, but I want you to understand that when the tourism industry had crashed, there was no money during COVID for us to resuscitate the industry and for us to now get back the 15,000 jobs which the tourism industry supported. We then had to go use the CIP funds, and the CIP funds was what was used as a catalyst to market St. Lucia and to let the world know that we were open for business.
So we're saying to St. Lucia and to St. Lucians that you were asking the questions, where's the CIP money? What did you do with the CIP money? Because you wanted to see some sort of a check handing ceremony like the Prime Minister is doing now, giving money,
exercise.
PR exercise. But the United Workers' Party was never about a PR exercise. We were about putting money where it matters. There was a need. The money was collected. It was in the consolidated funds. Once it was budgeted and allocated, the money was used to ensure that we do what was necessary for St. Lucians.
Absolutely. And just imagine what could be done with the missing $1.4 billion.
So let me ask you a question now.
Yeah.
Before the 1.4 billion and before the Prime Minister announced today, and I think a couple of days ago, that he would be giving $10 million to OKEU and the $240,000 to the Ambutu, I want to mention correctly, movement. Did you ever hear of the government using CIP money for anything else prior to that?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But you see, they're in a bind. They're on the back foot. You know, when I knew that the Labour Party, Nancy, I want you to trust me, they are lying about the CIP. They are hiding. This is the cover-up of the century. And we must be hard-hitting about it, because we must make sure that this never ever happens again in our country.
Well, talking about,
even if
yeah,
our party is found wanting to be in a scandal like this, young people like you and I must revolt against that.
we must.
Because this is wrong, what's happening. And it's not about politics. We genuinely are aggrieved, and we are vexed, we're outraged.
I
by
think
what's
you
taking
can
place.
agree with me that both you and I,
Yeah.
and many other members and supporters of the UWP, we can agree that we have said consistently that while we are members and supporters of the United Workers' Party, we are St. Lucians first.
Correct.
And when we come out and we speak about those issues, we speak about issues affecting our country, St. Lucia, not issues affecting UWP, but issues affecting St. Lucia. Now, speaking about lies and the breach of trust by this Prime Minister, we want to get into that because we've laid the foundation to speak about CIP. And I just wanted St. Lucians to get a greater appreciation of how under this government we were being treated for our passport vis-a-vis a few bucks and a few dollars. That's what I call it, because what they're doing is to put us at a disadvantage over money. So we're due for our first break, but when we come back, we're going to speak about the Prime Minister, what has happened with the CIP, and the statements that the Prime Minister has made vis-a-vis what is being presented as evidence to the contrary. And that is where I want St. Lucians, I want you to stay tuned, I want you to put on your thinking cap, and I want you to listen attentively. I do not want you to make decisions based on your political biases, but I want you to make decisions based on the information we'll be presenting you when we come back from the break.
If you're going to grow your country, you have to grow the capacity. You have to make sure they're healthy. You also have to make sure they're well educated. But that takes a plan. It takes a commitment. And it's not about just words. It has to be much more significant. And I have not heard anything here today, Mr. Speaker, that would give me any comfort, nor should it give any other St. Lucian comfort, that they're going to use this opportunity they found on their lap appropriately, and to make sure that the young people of this country and the workforce of this country are going to get jobs that they can make careers of, jobs they can raise their families on, jobs in which, yes, they can become international and raise their own standard of living. That should be the aspiration. And I did not hear any of that today, Mr. Speaker. I thank you. Okay? The member from Castries, he said it was only a madman who would believe that tourism would have recovered.
Mr. Speaker, I'm challenging you. Anything I say, he'll say, I'll do it. That's a challenge. Anything, Mr. Speaker, I say, that the member from Middle South says, I'll play it. I challenge him. Anything he says, I say, play it.
Flashback.
The government is continuing as usual, as if nothing happened. St. Lucia, the government of St. Lucia is the only government I believe that tourism will get back to how it was pre-COVID. I think it's the only government in the world that believes that. There's no other government, I think, who believes that except the government of St. Lucia. So what do? We continue with business as usual. We continue to build an airport based on the fact that our airport would get its income from arrivals. Are you serious? Do you really believe? I never knew. I never understood the impact of tourism in St. Lucia.
So, welcome back to the Roundtable. And again, as you can see, my name is Nancy Charles. I'm not your regular host, Spider nor Laura. And as we said in our first segment, for those of you who may have missed it, this is not the third episode of Rovergate. I think we said this is the new movie. Same movie, same characters, but just the different episode of the CIP scandal and the CIP files. I have with me my guest, Senator Honorable Fedee, and as I said to you, our political leader, who is out of state, but this is so important. And I thought, St. Lucia, that you would have wanted to hear from the leader of the opposition in terms of what has transpired of late. We had a scathing interview last evening with Mr. Martinez again, and every single time we have an interview, mouth open, story jump out. So, St. Lucia, I'd like to welcome to the program this evening our political leader, Honorable Alan Chastanet. Honorable political leader, can you hear us?
I can hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Okay, so good evening. And in our first segment, while you were not on, we did speak a little bit about the passport issue and what is happening in St. Lucia with St. Lucians and accessing the passport vis-a-vis persons who probably cannot even identify St. Lucia on a map, but they now have access to our passport and they are given priority. We spoke a bit about what has been happening with the scandal in CIP, and we really wanted St. Lucians to get a greater appreciation as to why we think that this matter is very important. We have said continuously that this is not a political issue. This is not a United Workers' Party issue. This is not an issue that we have come up with to try and bring down the government. But this is something that has transpired and fallen into the laps of St. Lucian, just like the Jufali affair in 2015 when we woke up and we saw St. Lucia in the headlines in a British newspaper. And it's almost like the same thing. We woke up and we heard there was this interview with this gentleman, Mr. Martinez, and lo and behold, all these allegations were being made about corruptions within the CIP, etc. And I am saying allegations, political leader, because rightly so, there's a court matter pending. I wanted you to give a little bit of explanation about that, because people seem to think that this court matter is what is going to resolve all of that, and even the Prime Minister wants to allude to that. But before that, let's speak about the breach of trust by Philip J. Pierre. When this matter came out, what his stance was on it, what did he say initially, even up to a couple of weeks ago, what was he saying, and then we will get into the issue of vis-a-vis what is it that we are finding out that what he says and what he does is two different things.
So it's great to be here. I did get to listen to some of your comments in the first segment. And let me just say this, that the worst thing for us to try to do is to demonize the CIP program because of maladministration and people who are really basically running it, in my opinion, corruptly. So whether St. Lucia chooses to be in the CIP program or not, Nancy, as long as the other OECS countries have a CIP program, then St. Lucia has a CIP program. Because a person who obtains his citizenship in Dominica, St. Kitts, Antigua, or Grenada, because of the OECS agreement, they become automatically citizens of our country, meaning they get full access to our economy. So I think it's even more important that we make sure that we all recognize that managing this program properly and making sure that the funds that are obtained through this program are put to the best use. So the Prime Minister has continuously evaded answering the questions. And if we look at the court case that Mr. Martinez has brought up upon us, the RICO case, and also the judicial review case in St. Kitts, they have really nothing to do with St. Lucia. And that this case is being brought to the courts by Mr. Martinez for him and his company because he feels aggrieved by the things that were taking place. He feels that he was misled and that persons took him for a fool, that he was participating in a program trying to do it properly, only to find out, in his opinion, that companies were colluding with the St. Kitts government, and now he's suggesting with the St. Lucia government, to his detriment. So the RICO court case has everything to do about Mr. Martinez and really nothing to do about St. Lucia. But the point of the RICO case is the evidence that Mr. Martinez has presented in the RICO case has a lot of similarities to St. Lucia. Let's take example, the prison project in St. Kitts, where Galaxy was allowed to sell 5,500 files, and it turned out to be 26,000 passports, which has a market value, meaning if it was sold for the right price, Galaxy should have raised about $1 billion. And in exchange of being able to sell those passports and collecting all the money themselves, not into an escrow account, Galaxy was supposed to build a $50 million prison. Well, according to the evidence in the RICO case, which has been confirmed by the new government in St. Kitts, Galaxy collected the money, the passports were issued, but the prison hasn't been built. Now, that seems very similar to the infrastructure program in St. Lucia. And the similarity doesn't just continue where the government of St. Lucia is saying that Galaxy is going to give us $100 million to build the infrastructure. But meanwhile, it's being reported that they were given 7,000 files, which is about 700 million US dollars of passports to be sold. And that Galaxy is collecting the money and also collecting the fees. And the money is not going into the escrow account. So it looks exactly like the infrastructure project. And the players are the same. So the same Les Can, who was the CEO of the CIP unit in St. Kitts, who was fired when the new government came into office, and Galaxy are the same players. And exactly the same setup seems to be happening. Now, the point that we're making, Nancy, which is a very, very important point, is that the Prime Minister should stop playing us for fools. And he should stop running away from his responsibilities as the Prime Minister. He cannot convince anyone, or nobody should be convinced, that we have to wait for the RICO case to be settled, for it to be determined whether there's corruption taking place, or there's something illicit, illegal, unlawful taking place. The Prime Minister, who's the Minister of Finance, who
Can you hear
all
me?
the ministers, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm saying before you go there about his responsibility, can you remind St. Lucians what was the Prime Minister's position after you've given that explanation with reference to what the issues or the areas of concerns are or were when Martinez came out and he spoke about what was happening in St. Kitts, and then we look at what was being proposed for the infrastructure program in St. Lucia, and we raised the alarm bells. And then Martinez himself gave interviews to say he has evidence of this is what is happening in St. Lucia. He also extended an invitation to the Prime Minister. He never summoned the Prime Minister. I think I listened to the interview and he said, listen, I have evidence and information to show you. Whatever it is that I'm experiencing in St. Kitts, I believe it's happening in St. Lucia and I have the evidence. Can you come to see the evidence? And there was so much information vilifying him, etc. But then the Prime Minister took a position, and his attitude, he was deflecting, he was very defensive. So can you tell us a little bit more about that, vis-a-vis what we're now seeing and now what we want to talk about in terms of the information that the Prime Minister we know have access to but refuses to investigate?
So the Prime Minister basically took a position that this was not his portfolio, and that he had a minister and there was a board, and that the answers that we were seeking, or the answers to the questions that we were seeking, the minister and the board would give it to us. Now, we've seen that that has not even worked. We don't know right now who the chairman of the CIP board is. I I mean, we've asked,
boards that
multitude
were
of people have
under you.
asked us.
Is that how this operates? That you and I have Senator Fedee there with me. You had the tourism authority as well. I'll get back to him. But let me ask you, as a former prime minister, you have many boards, and you know they're responsible for policy, implementing policy. But I'm assuming equally they are responsible for reporting to you, whether it be on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis. So is that the norm for prime ministers to say, I have a board, I have a minister who's responsible, so I don't interfere and I don't need to know what is happening, essentially, because that's what I'm hearing from the prime minister. Is that normal as a former prime minister? And then I ask Senator Fedee to also respond.
Well, it's two different things. So the day-to-day operations are for the board and for the management to undertake. Clearly, the minister is supposed to be in charge of overall policy. The prime minister, and in my case, I was the minister of finance, and so was Philip here, ought to make sure that they're achieving their objectives. But we're talking about a completely different issue. There are serious allegations that have been made against the board, members of the board, and against the minister. And the prime minister has every obligation to verify whether, in fact, that those allegations are true or not. To say, if I came out and I said, oh, we're going to wait for the solution of the RICO case before we're going to make a determination, that's abdicating my role as the prime minister. The fact is, the prime minister does have access to the information that we're seeking. He ought to have already accessed it, and he should have determined for himself whether, in fact, there's any validity in the claims that are being made. And after doing that, he should have come out publicly and said that he has personally investigated this matter. He is the prime minister. You know, in the Constitution, Nancy, there's only two persons that are required to be part of cabinet for a cabinet to be for a cabinet to be operational: prime minister and attorney general. All the other ministers are serving at the pleasure of the prime minister. I know people don't like to hear that, but that's legally what it is. And the prime minister is ultimately responsible and accountable for everything that takes place in every ministry.
Oh, I understand that. So, Senator Fedee, what are your views on the Prime Minister's position? Because I've heard him say many times, I have a minister and I don't interfere, and if the minister wants, he will tell me, etc. Share with us your experience, and I hope that's not putting you on the spot, but share with us your experience with Alan Chastanet as your Prime Minister. You were the Minister for Tourism. And was it like that? Was it a case where you were given largesse to do whatever it is you want? You don't have to report back to your prime minister. If at any time there was any issue that the prime minister heard about, he never called you up upon it. Share with us what was your experience and what ought to be, I suppose.
First of all, I would like to say that the prime minister's explanation are totally unacceptable, and they will lead many St. Lucians to believe that he's covering up. I don't think the majority of the St. Lucian people accepted from the minister, who is direct lead over that ministry, who first said that he wasn't sure whether the chairman had resigned, and then as well the prime minister saying that he's not aware. I mean, both unacceptable. In our case, Nancy, what we did is that we elected our boards together. So we came to cabinet, we looked at a statutory institution, we looked at the law, what are the obligations within the law, and what were the skill sets needed, the type of experience, the type of vision, and we looked for people within the country whom we felt married that vision and that direction where we were seeking to take a particular industry. So we made decisions together, and I always love, regardless of who I'm working with, whether it's Alan Chastanet, Butch Stewart, DBS before then.
Why, I even forgot that you work for Sanders as well.
I did as well.
And there was a reporting structure.
Oh, absolutely. I always like to run things by my bosses, and certainly a board chair is something that wouldn't have a major institution like the CIP, where millions are coming through, and the Minister of Finance doesn't care. That's absolute hogwash.
Okay, so let's get back to our political leader. I think he's still on the line. So, political leader, if you can hear me, if you can bring him up on the screen. There were a few questions that you indicated. I think you did a previous interview, and I'm not sure if persons heard you, but perhaps you would like to use the opportunity this evening. There are a few questions you're saying to us that as a prime minister, that he either ought to know or he has access to that information? And so we're saying that it is a cop-out that Philip J. Pierre is not answering those questions. Can you share with us some of those questions that you're asking the Prime Minister to answer? Because these would be answers to questions that either he knows, he ought to know, or he has access to.
So the first question that we need to know to determine the extent of the problem is it true that there were 6,000 files allocated to the hotel project? Because under our administration, we allocated 700. Mr. Manuel told Mr. Martinez that that number has been moved to 6,000. That's a very important number, and the Prime Minister ought to have been able to have confirmed that number by now. Now, if in fact it is 6,000, and they've lowered the price to 200,000 US dollars per file, that means that that's 1.2 billion dollars to build a $300 million hotel. So the Prime Minister, if in fact that's the case, and he did not know that, and all of a sudden he confirms that that is true, there has to be an explanation as to why would you allow a company to get all that money. Now, we heard, and the Prime Minister would have heard his minister say, the money doesn't belong to St. Lucia, the money belongs to Galaxy. That's not always true, or that is not entirely true. The money goes into an escrow account and is managed by both Galaxy and the CIP unit, because the money doesn't go to Galaxy for them to do whatever they want to do. The money goes into the escrow account and is supposed to be used specifically for the hotel project. So if the Prime Minister finds out that there were 6,000 files, that all the files have been already sold, the next question he has to find out is the $1.2 billion been put into the escrow account? And of that money, how much money has already been drawn down? Those are very important facts. Those are pieces of information that the Prime Minister ought to be able to get the same day that he asks.
So
If the Prime Minister...
Let me ask you a question, just very quickly. When you were Prime Minister, Galaxy submitted the project proposal and became approved, and they were an approved developer, and the hotel project was also approved under your administration. We have established that and we have admitted that. During your tenure, the agreement that you had with Galaxy was for how many files? Because people keep saying, well, Galaxy came underneath UWP. I don't know what you're talking about, but I want you to reiterate for the St. Lucian public so they understand that when Galaxy came and we had negotiations with them, you were the Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, but you were also the minister responsible for CIP. So you knew that information, you had access to that information. Can you tell the St. Lucian public how many files did you as Prime Minister approve for that Galaxy project?
So the project, we gave them 700 files. So 700 files were allocated so they could sell up to 700 files. And at $300,000 a file, that was $210 million. And the hotel was estimated to cost $300 million. So it means the remaining amount of money would have come in from Galaxy. So Galaxy paid for the land, would have paid for all of their own plans. We facilitated Galaxy in helping bring a proper management company in, so to make sure that once the hotel was built, that it would be properly run. So they were given 700 files, and I can say to you that when we left government in July of 2021, they had already received approval applications of 85 files.
So the question that you're really asking Philip J. Pierre with reference to the 6,000, it's not only how many files did his administration approve, but the up or the difference in files.
Because that would be 5,300.
That's right. So if you had approved under your administration 700 files, and the allegations being made by Martinez, and Martinez has indicated clearly that he didn't come up with that figure from the sky. He indicated that McLeod Emmanuel left St. Lucia and I'll ask you that question as well, came to Washington, D.C. to meet with him. And McLeod Emanuel was the one who told him that the number of files that were approved for Galaxy was 6,000. Don't you think, political leader, that the Prime Minister of St. Lucia ought to give us an explanation as to why was there an original approval by a previous administration of 700 and it was increased by 5,300 to 6,000 files. It wasn't increased by 300 or 200 or even 1,000. It was increased by 5,300.
Correct. And I would say this to you, that if a minister of mine went ahead and made such an important decision by himself without bringing it to cabinet, I would feel very, very upset. And I would feel that the minister was not acting appropriately. That's a very serious decision for any minister to make by himself. So
I deserve the sack.
yeah, you would. I mean, because that's
I think
a lot of money.
you resign yourself.
Before I get fired.
Because when you look at the implications,
Stupid.
as you say in political leader, how could a prime minister not know? Because that difference is huge, St. Lucia. And I want St. Lucians to understand that this is a huge jump from 700 to 6,000, from $210 million to $1.4 billion. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so I am understanding from you that the Prime Minister cannot just decide that he's not answering questions. But what is the second question? Because I think you also wanted to ask the Prime Minister as the Minister of Finance about the escrow account and the amount of money in that escrow account.
So if the prime minister, if by chance, that the minister of CIP made the decision to go to 6,000 files by himself and his board, and the prime minister is now only finding out that for the first time after these revelations have been made, the next thing the prime minister has to find out is the money there. So we know a person cannot be issued a certificate of citizenship unless the escrow agent confirms that they've received $200,000 from Nancy Charles. Then Nancy Charles and her family can be issued their certificate of citizenship. So there is a paper trail, a record, and the government and Ernest Hilaire has admitted that when they came into government, they found the escrow account and they recognized that they could reconcile that account, and they had reconciled the account that the 85 files that had been sold, the appropriate amount of money had already been received. I'm going to say this to you, Nancy. We sold about 800 passports in 5 years. This government would have been now on pace to sold almost, if I take Dominic's number, 28 to 30,000 passports in 2 years. If everything is being equal, meaning they're selling it for the same price, etc., I would say to you, Nancy, and to your audience, that that's impossible. But we could be wrong, and that's where the Prime Minister must satisfy himself and tell us, is the money in the escrow account? And is there a record that the money that was drawn down, that money went into the Canals Hotel project? Because we've seen that over the last 3 years, that there isn't a lot of movement on the Canals project. So I don't think anybody could be convinced that there was even $100 million that's been spent on the Canals project so far. Yet we're being told by Hilaire that they've already approved 1,400 files. That means $280 million has already been collected. And we know that the remaining amount of files are just pending their approval, but they've already been sold. So the Prime Minister, to satisfy himself and determine whether in fact the allegations that are being made in the RICO case have merit, that he owes it to us as St. Lucians, as the guardian of our Constitution, as the guardian of the assets of our country, guardian of our patrimony of our country, to have investigated this matter. And as I said, this information would be readily available for him. He doesn't have to go searching for it. If in fact he thinks that his minister and the board are lying to him, he then should have now gotten the Auditor General to have done an immediate audit of the escrow account to make a determination for himself as to whether it's. Now, he can't even say that he can refer to the audit, because that should be the next red flag to the Prime Minister, is that when he now realizes that the CIP unit is required in their own act to produce an annual report plus an audited financial statement, and they have not done that for the last 3 years, that should be another red flag for the Prime Minister. And that is why, at this point, I think the Prime Minister would have to say he should fire the CEO. He should insist that the CEO is fired. He said the CEO went to Washington on his own. The CEO said he went there to protect the integrity of the CIP unit. That's a direct conflict. Somebody's lying. And I would like to think it's more Mr. Emmanuel that's lying than the Prime Minister, because if the Prime Minister is lying, we have even a more serious problem than we think in this country.
I quite agree with you, political leader. And then I'm very pleased that you're saying to St. Lucians, and I want to re-emphasize to St. Lucians, based on what you're saying to us, that if the Prime Minister, upon hearing all these allegations, being a responsible Minister of Finance, but not only that, I want to draw back on the fact that the Prime Minister in his personal capacity is an accountant by profession. Is that what he is? He's an accountant. He's a business person. He runs an auditing firm or business firm, etc. And so these are some of the things that will pop up in your mind as an accountant, that I'm hearing all these allegations. And if the Prime Minister is serious about corruption and not aiding and abetting corruption within his cabinet, when you hear something so serious and so egregious, that there is a scandal, that there is monies that are unaccounted for, the opposition is making claims, and a gentleman who's in the industry who says that he has evidence is also making those claims, to the extent that he has filed a lawsuit in the court, and he has named the CEO of the CIP. I mean, if the man was just talking papi show and coming out and making all these allegations, etc., then you say, okay, me say just talking papi show, I taking it on. But the man has talked his talk. He has filed a case in the courts in America, and he has named, as part of that case, he has named the CEO of the CIP, and we are now learning that he has also, St. Lucia has also hired a lawyer to represent McLeod Emmanuel, which we will get to because we're getting ready for our break. But he has, as political leader said, he has the Auditor General at his disposal. There's an annual audit that is supposed to take place by an independent auditor, and the Prime Minister himself should hold his minister accountable and say, listen, I'm hearing all these stories and all these things, and I need to know what is going on. So I need that report, or I am going to do my own investigation. I'm coming in to find out what's going on. But the Prime Minister has not done that, and so in the next segment, as we get ready for our break, we will find out, because the bombshell was we had an interview with Lisa. When we come back, I'm going to go straight to Senator Fedee before I come to you, political leader, to share your thoughts on that interview with Martinez last evening, as to what the Prime Minister said and what Martinez said the Prime Minister is doing. I mean, I don't even want to be able to speak that because I don't want them to sue me. Maybe it's better they sue you, Senator Fedee. So we're due for
They're
another
suing
break.
Everybody these days.
We're due for another break, and right after the break, St. Lucia, we're going to speak about this bombshell, because the Prime Minister got a question from Lisa Joseph of DBS about who went to Washington and who knew who went, and he thought that was the bombshell. He was, oh, that's the bombshell, but he did not realize that the bombshell was coming after. So after this break, we're going to reveal and remind you, St. Lucia, of the interview and what is it the Prime Minister did or did not do. We'll be right back. This
public debt in 2022 was at $4,395.1 million. In 2023, it is at $4,783,000,000, almost a $400 million increase in debt. Now remember, this is the government that spoke about for the first year they had to do no borrowings. And all of a sudden in the last 2 years, which means that our debt to GDP, which was just at 69.5% in 2022, has gone to 72.9% in 2023. And these are just preliminary figures.
Do we have a government in
Repeat
place
this, please.
that cannot manage the country sufficiently that if you're trying to build a house, that if you are trying to set up a business that require a water connection, it means that you can't be connected? What are you supposed to do with your plans? And this is the state that our water infrastructure has actually reached in the country. So Bradley is absolutely right when he said that, look, this is not just basic, this is absolutely essential. And WASCO making this announcement, the government must really do something urgently. And this is one of the most important and crucial initiatives that they could undertake to ensure that a critical component of our infrastructure is dealt with.
Welcome back to the Roundtable, and this is our final segment. We have been discussing the CIP scandal that has been affecting St. Lucia, the missing $1.4 billion, the Prime Minister who has refused in public to answer any questions from any reporter, who's using the RICO case as a front not to answer questions, but all these questions still remain, and St. Lucians are mind-boggling, and St. Lucians are, they don't know what to do anymore. I think St. Lucians will take to the streets on Sunday. Senator Fedee, I don't know about you, but I think St. Lucians will take to the streets on Sunday with their placards saying, where's the money? Where's our money? And St. Lucians, if you're listening to me and you've been asked to come to march on Sunday, that perhaps may be one of the placards. So Senator Fedee, can I ask you, where's the money? What's going on with that $1.4 billion? And what have you heard the last report as to what's happening with that money? What's happening with this issue?
Nancy, we're all trying to find out. We're all trying to find out. But
Where's
the
the
last
money?
I heard from the Minister of CIP was that he was going to seek permission from Galaxy to tell us where the money is. And that has been some months. And then, you know, you hear from the Prime Minister, I'm not saying anything because the matter is in court. But prior to that, he said that, you know, it was a fraudulent claim to say that St. Lucia was in court. And so we've seen a cover-up. We've seen attempts by the government. I frankly believe that the Prime Minister so far, by the way that he has handled this, and the entire government, they have actually misrepresented their office. They have let their offices down by the manner in which that they have dealt with this matter. When a country is in crisis, any business of government, it is time for leadership to emerge to ensure that you lead the country through difficult times. We're not seeing that level of leadership, and this disappoints me. I think that this whole thing could have been put to bed a long time ago had they just fess up to say, listen, this is what has happened, X, Y, Z, so many passports, so many files, so many families.
And this thing would have gone
applied.
over a long time because you would have shared the correct information. Correct.
These are the countries that the people have come from. Even before he lays a report before the Parliament, I think that the situation requires of him to ensure that, look, I need to give the people of St. Lucia, don't be selective with information. Don't tell us what's approved, and then you don't tell us how many people have applied, and then you don't tell us, well, this is how many allocations we have made to Galaxy. Those are very basic information. Nancy, when you are dealing with a state asset, and a passport belongs to us, the government, and the people of St. Lucia, and whenever an investor is dealing with any matter of state, I think that the government owes it, regardless of which administration, owes it to the people to explain what the matter is and what the details of any of those deals are.
So let me share something with you before we go back to political leader. In terms of the money, And somebody did a calculation for me, and I never looked at it that way. And I wanted to get your thoughts on it. So, $1.4 billion, the 6,000 passport that Galaxy is said to have sold in our name at 200,000, not the 3, but at 200,000, it amounts to about 1.4 billion US dollars. If you take that and you divide that by the last estimate or guesstimate population of St. Lucia of $180,000, it amounts to about $20,000 per person. So St. Lucia, I'm thinking to myself that that money that Ernest Hilaire says that does not belong to us but belongs to Galaxy, if this money were to be used and allocated to each St. Lucian at $20,000, let me ask you a question. How far would $20,000 go for you? I can put your business out. You're a dad of 3. You have 2 young boys and you have a new baby girl. You have Pampers to buy. You have, what is it called? Similac. You have Similac to buy, you know, and wipes, and even the boys, they are growing, boys,
Football
they
camp,
have camps and
summer
everything.
camps and
How
swimming
far
lessons.
would $20,000 go for you as an ordinary St. Lucian? What would you be able to do with $20,000?
I think the expense that's at the forefront of most St. Lucians' mind right now would be back to school. And Nancy, I think that $20,000 would actually allow me to do about 7 years of back to school expenses. Buying the shoes and the bags and the uniforms and all that stuff.
And the snacks for
books.
school and groceries.
Not their snacks, but their school supplies. I mean, that's cutting it.
Oh God,
I
the
mean,
snacks are...
The snacks are a whole
Yeah.
different story. But what I'm saying is that $20,000 can do a lot for families. Going to the supermarket, I know a lot of people may spend about $1,000, and that's a lot, right, for a lot of families to be able to do. But that's about the average, I think. And so you can have almost 2 years of your grocery bill. That is what we're talking about. Electricity. There's so much that $20,000
That's a
can
lot
do.
of money.
$20,000 can put you on your way to buying a new car.
Well, let's
It can be a down payment for buying land.
Let's equate that now to what is happening in our St. Lucian context about healthcare. $20,000 can get you to take your child to see the doctor, or somebody to go and do a test, an x-ray. We now have this new MRI happening that you don't have to go to Matnik. Can you imagine, in terms of healthcare, what people would be able to do with $20,000? And I'm not even going to speak about the $75,000 insurance that we propose, but just let's look at that money. And I want St. Lucians to understand why I'm asking this question, because this is what you have been denied.
But you know,
This is what you have been shortchanged. This is what has been stolen or taken from you. At minimum, $20,000 that could help each and every St. Lucian in this country.
yeah, and in a family of 4, it's $80,000 per household. So that's a car for some families.
That's a mortgage.
Yeah.
That's fixing up the house.
That's a huge
That's putting
deal.
an extra room on the house for you have 4 children and it's a 2-bedroom home and you can afford to put an extra room on the house.
Nancy, in essence, the Labour Party government has sold out the people of St. Lucia in favor of a foreign investor. And every St. Lucian should be outraged because of this. This is the worst decision I've ever seen in the governance of this country.
But I want to correct as well that, and St. Lucians people have been asking me, Senator Fedee, and I want you to clarify if I'm accurate on this, but people have been asking me, so what is in it for them? And I say to them, here's the caveat and here's the trick. Every single passport or every single file or family that is sold, there is an administrative fee that goes to the government, but there's also an administrative, what is the fee called, with the agent.
The processing fee?
The processing fee, yes. This agent makes a processing fee as well. And so the more passports, that's how I want you to understand it, St. Lucia. This has never been about you. This has been about them. So we have said over and over, there is a preferred agent in St. Lucia. that I will not mention the name, but everybody knows who we are. Best friends. They are best friends to each other. It's a whole family friends thing. So this preferred agent is the one who has been processing all that 6,000 passports on behalf of Galaxy. So the more passports that are being processed, the more money this preferred agent makes. The more money the agent makes, the more money his best friends make. There's the more money for the campaign, the more money for them to live lavish lifestyle, the more money for them to buy new cars, for them to travel to be in Paris and Rome. You see the pictures all over the place. That's what this is about,
but
St.
you know,
Lucia.
Nancy, I think
processing
that
fees, and they're living largesse at your expense.
there, you know, other questions that will come up. People will have to explain whether there are apartments in Dubai that they own.
That's what I heard.
People will have to explain whether they were sponsored lavish trips by Galaxy to the Mediterranean on private jets and on private mega yachts. People will have to explain.
That's a lot of
Who
explanation.
paid for those, and whether Galaxy used its wealth
And
some
who's
of
building second homes?
and all of that stuff. People will have to answer that, and it really is at the expense of the people of St. Lucia. And so all of the gimmick we see, them trying to divert away from dealing with the real scandal, we are at the cusp of this bombshell really exploding. And it's not a joke. It's a serious matter.
It's a serious matter. Let's bring back political leader and leader of the opposition. So, leader of the opposition, I have been seen banded about all these issues about $9 million payout and how to make this go away, etc. And I was a little bit confused. And I think you heard the interview. And my information, or what you've told St. Lucians as well, is that you're in DC. And whilst you're in DC, it is your intention to, as St. Lucians, we have a little Creole thing that we say, "Fais jouch with pow," meaning that you would now go and see for yourself. You have given the approval to Martinez, and you've said to him, "Listen, I'm going to be in DC, and I will finally meet you in person and finally see the evidence that you've been talking about." But prior to that, I heard last night about this $9 million amount being bandied about, and who wants to pay who. So please clarify for us, what is this issue about this money and making things go away? I want you to clarify for the St. Lucian public.
So before I get right to that, Nancy, I just want to follow up on what we were finishing off in terms of questions that the Prime Minister needs to ask himself. The infrastructure program is where a program where a person is going to pay apparently $100,000 to Galaxy. Galaxy collects all of the money. Galaxy collects all of the fees. In exchange, Galaxy is going to spend $100 million US on infrastructure. Now that, if the numbers are right, 7,000 files, that means that they should be collecting $700 million. So like the hotel, if the hotel only cost 400 million and you're collecting 1.2 billion, that means that you have $800 million US that we don't know where that money's gone. And now you have another 600 million. So that's the 1.4 billion dollars that was being spoken about US, which is over 4 billion EC dollars. And Dominic is 100% right. That's $20,000 per household. So in his household, himself, his wife, his 3 kids, that's 5 people. That would be $100,000 EC that each household in St. Lucia would have obtained, which is a lot of money. And I think you guys have done a great job to explain what the opportunities were. Another way of looking at it, Nancy, and if you remember, is that the health insurance that we were putting in was to raise $80 million a year to be put specifically into the operations of the healthcare center. So 10 years would be 800 million EC dollars, which could be easily come from the $4 billion we're talking about. Means that the government through CIP would have paid for health insurance for every single St. Lucian, and nobody would have had to make any contribution. In fact, you could probably put in more money than the $80 million a year and provide people even more services than when initially were being envisioned. Now, what happened with Martinez on his show that was absolutely shocking and disturbing is that the prime minister has for the last couple of weeks said he's not involved. Now, I don't believe him because when we did the infrastructure program and it came up at the parliament, this was supposed to be the year of infrastructure. And remember, we pointed out that there was a reduction in the Ministry of Infrastructure's allocation by $40 million. And that money was put into the Ministry of Economic Development, which falls under the Prime Minister's office. So it obviously means that the year of infrastructure, was to come out of the Prime Minister's office. So the Prime Minister would be fully aware of how this infrastructure program with Galaxy is supposed to work. So for the Prime Minister to say he doesn't know anything, I didn't believe him. The
The
Prime Minister
leader. St.
to
Lucians don't
tell us.
believe him either. I can certainly tell you that.
So the prime minister also told us that he did not know that Manuel went to Washington for one. Manuel went to Washington D.C. Without the permission of the prime minister, and I think that Mr. Martinez has alluded to that fact on several occasions that the prime minister did know. It was find out last night that the prime minister said, I'm sorry, that Mr. Martinez said that a lawyer representing Mr. Claude Emmanuel, who was that same lawyer, is also representing Timothy Harris. So the question is, who is paying for that lawyer for Mr. Claude Emmanuel? And who is the lawyer representing? Is it Mr. Emmanuel in his personal capacity? Is it Mr. Emmanuel as the CEO of CIP unit? We were told by Mr. Martinez last night that that lawyer contacted his lawyers and indicated that the Prime Minister of St. Lucia asked for him to determine what it would take for this case to go away. Mr. Martinez, believing
Just
that
hold
the
on. I want
lawyer
you to
was
repeat that. You saying to St. Lucians that the Prime Minister, who indicated that, and I saw an interview, him beating his hand on his chest and saying, but he's a big man. He's a big man. If he does anything wrong, he'll answer to himself. This same Prime Minister who said that he has nothing to do with that, he's not speaking anything to do with CIP, let the RICO case take care of itself. The matter is in court. We don't want to talk about it. You saying to me that this same Prime Minister is being alleged to have contacted Martinez, and that is via lawyers, to say to Martinez via his lawyers, what will it take to make this case go away? Is that what you're saying, political leader?
I am. And again, what is very confusing, and I think that confused, Mr. Martinez himself said he was confused, is that, okay, he felt that that was an instruction coming from the Prime Minister, but he still thought he was dealing with Mr. Emmanuel and also potentially down the road, Mr. Hilaire individually. So he then said to the lawyer, through his own lawyers, that he would accept $9 million US. Now, again, I want to say this. The RICO case has nothing to do with St. Lucia. The RICO case is all about Mr. Martinez. And let's not pretend. It's about him and him trying to recover his losses. I'm not here to fight Mr. Martinez's fight for him. What I'm here to do is that the evidence that Mr. Martinez is bringing to the table and making public is damaging and worrisome. Well, worrisome is an understatement. Okay, it's alarming what is taking place here. So he offered 9 million US dollars. The lawyer then came back to his lawyers to say the prime minister said that that's too much and that he's looking for, I think I'm trying to remember what Mr. Martinez said, he's looking for a more reasonable amount, and that Mr. Martinez would have to take Mr. Emmanuel and anybody else from St. Lucia out of the RICO case. And importantly, he would have to say that the St. Lucia CIP program was clean and clear. So Mr. Martinez showed last night as evidence his response to the same lawyer. And he showed us the documents that the lawyer he was speaking to is the lawyer on the RICO case in the defense, who's representing Claude Emmanuel and Tim Harris. And he wrote back to him to say, look, I'm sorry, that was never my intention. I expected the 9 million US dollars was going to be paid for by Mr. Emmanuel, by Hilaire, and some other people I think he named in St. Lucia that he felt that had been defrauding the taxpayers of St. Lucia, and he had no intentions of ever accepting or settling the case if in fact the money came from the state. Now, regardless of how much money the state would have ultimately settled for, even if it was $1, when were we going to find that information out? How would we have ever known that that took place? And where would that $1 have come from?
I think we
Would
would
that
have
come from the
been
coffers?
told anything about that money, about that negotiation, and I see Senator Fedee shaking his head in agreement. And I think many St. Lucians, if you look under the live as well, is already agreeing with us that this Prime Minister would have never ever come out and say to St. Lucians, listen, I think this is bad for the country. I am willing to negotiate with Martinez to settle this case, etc., etc. And I can bet you, St. Lucia, that even with Martinez coming out to say that the Prime Minister is trying to negotiate or has tried to negotiate a settlement, that he will come out and say that this is not true. He will come out and say that that's a lie, or he will come out and deflect and not answer the question, just like he never answered the question that Lisa Joseph asked him, you know. But I think this is very concerning, political leader, that the Prime Minister comes out in public, he puts up a face, he puts up a front and say one thing, but in private, he says something else. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so I'll give you an opportunity perhaps to give your final remarks before we go to Senator Fedee for his final remarks on this matter. But I can certainly say to St. Lucian that there will be a lot more to be said about this, because we're limited in time on the roundtable, but we will use other ways and means to educate you and to give you the information to satisfy you that something untoward is happening in the CIP, and this Labour Party administration is trying to hide it from us. So over to you, political leader, for your closing remarks before I go over to Senator Fedee.
So
to maybe finally remember as you get ready to leave tonight.
I think that regardless of what information now comes out from this government, I think that they have breached the trust of all of us sufficiently that we ought to be demanding an independent investigation. I think that without a doubt, Claude Emmanuel has been an embarrassment. I think that he's not capable of doing the job that he's being asked to do. I think he was put there for other reasons. I think that he has to be fired. I think that the minister has breached the trust and has been deceitful and less than honest to the public of St. Lucia, and he should be removed from this portfolio, pending an independent audit to confirm all of the information that is being provided to us. What is concerning to me and should be concerning to all St. Lucians is that this is the same movie that we've seen repeatedly. We had Rochamel. Even after an independent investigation with 3 judges, the government never admitted to the truth. In fact, Kenny Anthony never agreed to give any testimony in that particular case. Greinberg, we still don't know what the truth is. the government has lived in complete denial as to what took place. The Robert Ainsworth letter, where thousands of acres of land was sold, including the mining rights of the country, and the government has remained mute about that particular situation. We had the Jufali matter, and again, where we found out about the situation in the Daily Mirror that we had an ambassador. We still don't know what's happened to the dialysis center. We still don't know where all the money has gone and actually what happened and how that happened. So I'm discomforted, and I think all solutions should be extremely discomforted with what's taking place in this country. The complete mismanagement of the resources of the state to the detriment of solutions. We see the state right now of healthcare dismal. We just heard tonight that the CEO of Millennium Heights has resigned. We see the state of security and what's taking place between the commissioner, the deputy commissioner, and the number of homicides that we have in this country. We see what's taking place with infrastructure, whether it be the selling of our ports, the halls of justice, HIA Airport, the St. Jude's Hospital. The list goes on and on and on of complete ineptness, corruption, and I think that we are in a state in absolute crisis. That's not even to talk about what's taking place with our culture. So what has taken place with CIP, Nancy, and to all solutions is a microcosm, is a part and parcel, is the DNA of this Labour Party. Of the first thing that happens, there's a secret. Everything's in secrecy. Once the secret is now revealed, they start to lie. And in order to make the lies work, we have propaganda. So that's why we say that this is a party of secrets, lies, and propaganda. And all of these things are coming down and impacting the quality of life of people. We haven't even begun to talk about how the livable minimum wage that the government's proposing of $1,000 a month.
There's quite a
Which
lot
is which is
to talk about
$52, right?
this government in terms of what's happening. I think, and as you rightly stated, there's so many issues happening. But we thank you so much for your perspective. We know that you will be back soon. Thank you very much. I know your schedule is very busy, but you thought it was important enough for you to be here and at least to assure St. Lucia, unlike the current Prime Minister, that you are Prime Minister in waiting and that you are on top of these issues and that you will continue to be an advocate and to advocate for St. Lucia to ensure that the resources of this country are being managed and it is managed in the right way to ensure that St. Lucians can benefit. So thank you very much. And I know it's very late where you are, but have a good evening. And then I will revert back to Senator Fedee and we will talk again. So good evening.
Thank you.
So, Senator Fedee, we're getting ready to wrap up. As I said, time is of the essence.
Yeah.
But we have unloaded a lot on St. Lucians, and I know St. Lucians must be going to bed with a heavy heart this evening. As we continue to hear every week, it's another story unfolding, another secret, another thing happening in this thing. It looks like like you have a saw, and no matter what you do to the saw, it's not healing and it doesn't go away. It looks like this thing is going to be expanding even bigger as we go along. What are your thoughts as we get ready to close?
Nancy, as a St. Lucian, I have been waiting on the government to allay my fears, to allay my anxiety, to make me feel less anxious about the problem that is before us. The information that has unearthed, I think really it's shocking, it's appalling. It's not very good for the soul. But I know we're out of time, so I just want to say these few things. I think for me going forward, I want the Prime Minister to give the nation a very solid address outlining the facts honestly. I want to see, Nancy, the revocation of all the illegal citizenships that have been sold. I would like to see more reports for the past 2 years. They need to be done urgently. And Nancy, lastly, I would like to see a Freedom of Information Act. The manner in which the government has managed the information pertaining to our passports, our CIP program, has been appallingly shocking and wanting. And this administration will go down in history as one of the most secretive and one of the most egregious administrations as it pertains to managing a crisis. So, Nancy, thank you. And good night to your listeners. I want to thank them for being with us.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Fedee, and let me say thank you again to our political leader, St. Lucia. We've had another episode of the Roundtable where you heard what continues to happen within our CIP program. I think for me the biggest news this evening is the two things: that all this money, if you allocated it to St. Lucians, you could have had St. Lucia. Yes, you looking at me right now, you listening to me right now. $20,000, just $20,000 from all that $1.4 billion could have gone a long, long way for you as a family. I see people who are on the streets calling and asking with papers, raffle sheets, trying to raise money to do a basic surgery for $5,000, $3,000, and even $4,000. Can you imagine $20,000 from that $1.4 billion that he let's says belongs to Galaxy could have helped you? This is what this is about. This is about you, and this is about these people who can afford. They can go to the supermarket, they can buy whatever it is they want, they can eat whatever they want, they can pay their bills on time, they can go to hospital overseas, they can go, when they're sick, they can go overseas. They go overseas to do just their basic health check. You have to go to the doctor down here, but they go overseas, they can afford. And so they don't care about you. So they allow the monies that can be used to help you as ordinary St. Lucians. I want you to always remember that. When people talk about CIP and they say, well, I don't care, what is this about? Tell them $20,000. That's what this is about for me and for you and for my daughter and for my son. This is what this is about. And the second thing I want you to remember, St. Lucia, we see a pattern of behavior surrounding one government minister over the years. One government minister that continues to be embroiled in scandal after scandal. In 2015, there was a Jufali matter. In 2015, again, there was the Rovergate scandal, and that is why everything is tied, because we will continue. We won't let go. We have to let you know the character of the man we're dealing with. 2015, he was involved in Jufali scandal. Passport, monies, joint account, all kinds of things. 2015, again, he was embroiled in Rovergate, bringing in vehicles, not wanting to pay duties, finding all kinds of shortcuts not to pay duties. You now have another scandal with CIP. Money's missing. In fact, investors are missing, as I heard. Money's missing and investors. Imagine people are missing, St. Lucia. People are missing, investors are missing. So if they are missing, it means they're gone with your money already. And that is for another show. But I just want you to understand what is going on in our country. And so on Sunday, when you see the hypocrites are going to be lining the streets and walking the streets saying they're walking for progress, I want you to understand that this is a march of protest against this government. Don't be fooled by some of the people that you will be see there because they are being forced but to use step money and back to school money and vouchers and t-shirts and $100 or whatever so they can go on march. I have never heard a government march against himself. This is the first. But I want you to remember, at the end of the day, you are what matters. And this is a government that promised to put you first. I want you to ask yourself, do I feel like I'm being put first? This has been another episode of the Roundtable. I want to say thank you very much and have a good night. And please remember, on Sunday, the United Workers' Party, we host our annual Sunday Live. It will be prefaced by a youth forum. We will also have some exciting young people who will be speaking on Sunday at our Sunday Lives. So I want you to remember to tune in on Sunday, I think from about 5:30 or 6:30 in the evening, we have our Sunday Live. Look out for the notifications. Go on our Facebook and our social media pages and continue to share our lives, continue to support the United Workers' Party, because this is the party that has your interest at heart. Thank you very much and good night.